I earned my degree online at Arizona State University. I chose to get my degree at ASU because I knew that I'd get a quality education, they were recognized for excellence, and that I would be prepared for the workforce upon graduating. To be associated with ASU, both as a student and alum, it makes me extremely proud, and having experienced the program, I know now that I'm set up for success. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
I thank you very much for tuning into That Will Never Work podcast. So when the unexpected hit your business, will you panic or will you pivot? I am joined today by Brenda to talk about what real crisis management looks like and how leaders can stay ready, steady, and strong under pressure. So you might want to listen to it right after this.
Educate, empower, enable, impact. Thank you for tuning in to That Will Never Work, an award-winning podcast where we share inspiring information and personal experiences related to business and the entrepreneurial journey from those who are leaders in their respective field. Now, here's your host, author and business coach, Maurice.
All right. So we're going to jump all the way into this. Like I said, we have this powerful, purposeful, poised individual with us today. So the question we're going to start off with, what if your greatest test as a leader isn't just during the growth times, but it's how you respond to everything when suddenly everything feels like it's falling apart? So Brenda, how do you advise someone to stay as poised as you?
Well, unfortunately, that's like being forged like gold. You know, you got to go through the fire, and I mean extreme heat for many, many, many hours until you get that refined. People like, even still to this day, somebody will say something, and yeah, I have one or two reactions. Either I'm totally stoic because I've already been through it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, well, this is an easy fix. We know exactly what to do. Or my reaction is, what? And when you get option number 2, congratulations, you've now surprised me. Like, that's fantastic. I welcome it. It's great. Let's do this. Like, seriously, come on.
But you know what? And I like option 2 because it shows genuineness, right? It shows authenticity. It shows who you are. And it for me, for someone like me, it's like, all right, we're in it now. We're about to go to battle. Because if you could kind of laugh it off just a little, it takes some of the edge off, not just yourself as the leader, but it also shows your team that you're not rattled, right?
Yeah. And so, here's the thing is like, when something new like comes up or a crisis comes up, right? And it's really kind of interesting. There's a woman, I cannot remember her name, but I was watching her video one time. She was talking about how men operate, right? So when you guys are in your groove and you're doing your provide, protect, and love, all sorts of stuff, but then the wife comes in, she's like, I need to talk to you right away. And then all of a sudden it's like, blah, 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 blah. It's like all of a sudden that just like total, it's like dragging a needle across a record, right? It just completely disrupts your peace because your peace is in the doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So imagine that as a leader, that you're in your groove, you're in your jive, you just had this really awesome meeting, profit levels are up, and then somebody brings and drops a bomb right on you. There's that needle across the record all over again, and now it interrupts your peace. So you have one or two options. You can respond or react. But here's the thing. No matter how you turn into the wind, or if you run away, it doesn't matter. This comes from one of my favorite mentors. It's anxiety. And anxiety, the only thing anxiety is the anticipation of future pain. So if you can get good at when you're confronted, okay, we'll go under there. When you're confronted, sorry, it's my director of security jumping in here today. So when you're good at instantly
You're back. You're back.
Okay, thank you. I have a window that's up here. So anyway, we'll just keep moving on.
Yeah.
Is to talk about Christ, and I'm like, this is like a demonstration here, like where
Right.
we're in the middle of talking about it. So now this is what you do. You just keep moving on. So if you're good at reframing and recognizing that, holy cow, you get the rush of emotion, you get the WTF that goes through your mind, and then you have that one moment. So like if you can get good at just stopping time and recognizing that, listen, the only thing I'm experiencing right now is the anticipation of future pain. Once you reframe that, then you have the ability to move forward because you're instantaneously acknowledging what it is that you're most afraid of. Right? And that is everything crapping out, everything just totally bombing, stuff not working. Like your mind is literally going to the worst case scenario, and it usually doesn't go that far. Like that's what we're most concerned about. So if you get good at stopping that time and making that reframe happen, so where you're just acknowledging that as a leader, this is what I'm nervous about, what happens is it starts to kind of like part the way for you to think a little bit clearer, so that way you can start putting together, okay, what do I need to know? Who needs to be involved? And what is my time frame?
So I want to pull back for a moment. I would like for you to define respond versus react.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we don't know the difference.
Yeah. So a reaction is the immediate, whatever's coming out of you, verbal, physical, it's that knee-jerk response, right? That's a reaction. And a reaction is never thought out. It's 100% emotional, and it's usually fear-based. When you're talking about crisis, it's that I've never seen anybody have a happy reaction in crisis. So it's usually fear-based, right? Where a response is you take a mental knee and you're like, okay. It's slowing yourself down so that way you can get the right information to make the right decisions. You're not creating some sort of story that's in your head that about stuff that you really don't even know. People who react, they immediately form a story in their head because they're seeing some sort of evidence, they're seeing some sort of proof, and so that way they logically think it's going to wind up being like this. When you have somebody that is a responder, that's an individual who says, well, before we do anything, I think we need to know more about this. Like, is this a rumor? Is this conjecture? Is it really, truly, honestly a problem? And if so, how big is it? And what is the impact that it's going to have on it? And everybody knows what it's like when we run up against that person that reacts, because then all of a sudden, once that person is that leader, even if when you're leading yourself, you get that emotional reaction and that knee-jerk response to something, and then everybody else now is on fire, and everybody else is now in defense mode. And for those who are directly connected to whatever the issue is, now they're in like, holy crap, I don't want to get in trouble. So you basically lit the whole fuse for everybody. Like we all took our fuses, we tied them together. One knee-jerk response, everything is lit, which means everybody's going to start popping off, right? The person that is able to just stop and just say, okay, let's what is really going on? You know, let's take a moment here. Let's not let our imagination get the best of us. Let's figure that, let's work the problem instead of the problem working us. That's really the difference.
And I ask that because there's a lot of us that stick very close to the script. We don't know how to think outside the box. And I think that takes a skill over a period of time. Like you said, you're 20, 30 years in business, right? You know, human resources and all those type of things that you've done. You've been able to say, whoa, wait a minute, and then chuckle at it. But some people look at them like, hey, you know what? This is A, B, C, D. Now you got C1. I don't know how to deal with that. So how would you tell someone to be able to pivot or maybe something practices they can do so they know how to handle that C1 moment?
Yeah, first thing you do is take a big deep breath. That's the best thing that you can do. So when you drop a bomb, it's like, John is now coming in again late for the 150th time. Okay. Because what it does is it physically re-energizes you, and it actually slows down your system. It really does. It just, that one person that says that one thing, or you ever sit in a room where somebody, you know, is the joker in the group, and they say that one joke that, you know, crosses the line, and then you just and then go.
Sometimes that is too triggering for some of us because we're a little too emotional, right?
Yeah.
Or that individual has gotten underneath our skin, you know, because it happens all the time and you already know it's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, and so how do you prepare for situations like that where you kind of know it's coming? You know, and it could be anything else in business, right? You know, along those lines. But I think that's a great example. So how would you prepare for something like that in the event that comes up? Especially since you know it's going to.
Yeah, it's, you know, to get to that point where it becomes more automatic is that you have to do it manually. You know, you just like, the thing is that when you're exposed to a new potential practice like this, right, you now can't be unexposed to it. Like, you can't unlearn what you just learned a second ago, right? So when these things come up, the thing about like adult learning theory and how adults learn is that we take in information that's relevant to our environment, and then we have to apply it. Well, the good news is that with people and something like this, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, right? It's going to happen. So you're just ready for it. So when you see it happening, you know, like, that's when you get that recall. It's like, yep, we just talked about this, and it's instantaneous. It's like, just take your breath, right? Practice it a few times. You know, that's the thing, is like, you're not going to be really good at it in the beginning. You're probably going to miss it a few times, right? You may botch it up a little bit along the way, but the more you do it, you improve to the point where you can literally go from cognitively thinking about it all the way to an automatic response where, and it's really funny. I'll give you a really good example. I have boundaries with my team, and my team jokes about it for years. Like, every team that I've led, they figured it out, and they've always joked about it. So when somebody comes up to me and they tell me something that sounds ridiculous to me, like it's unreasonable, and I will look at them and I go, seriously? Right? And they laugh because they can predict it. I'm so consistent. And I found that the seriously comment was a combination of me being me, but then also yet asking the question, like, is this really real? Right? They know that, okay, we've run up against the first buoy. Yeah, there's two buoys. The second one is less favorable, right? Like behind a naval ship. If you've ever been around a naval ship that's in dock, there's two buoys. The first one is your warning. That's your warning, and that's the only one that you get. You get to the big white one. It was nice knowing you. So they get to the first buoy, and it's just like, I look at them, I'm like, seriously? And I'll say it in a couple of different ways. It's just like, somebody says something that's a bad idea, or they've been insulting or something, I'll just look at them like, seriously? Right? Or if they say something that's not like, it's just something that's like caught me off guard, I'm like, seriously? Really? You know? And they all laugh. They're like, okay, she's hit the limit, right? We can still work with her here. But then when somebody does something that is like highly inappropriate, right, or now they're starting to want to argue with me, and not debate, I'm talking about like take it to the mattress kind of argument, right? Or they're doing something that is now violated a policy, or they have crossed a boundary that is totally inappropriate. My next phrase apparently is, yeah, we're not going there. And they're the two easiest things I do, but I've never once launched in immediately into judging somebody, making them feel bad for something. They just know that they run up against my boundaries with those two things, and that's it. If they cross it and they don't slow down and they're like a runaway freight train, that's when a whole different version of Brenda gets into play. And that's when I have to like jump in them, and it's like, okay, listen, we need to just stop and take this down a level. I want to hear everything that you have to say. Clearly, this is an indicator that I've got a bigger issue that I have to deal with, which means I have to be a different version of myself at that point. So I'll give you, for instance, so if you're okay with that.
Yeah, fine.
Years ago, this is like 9 years ago, I stopped an employee from becoming an active shooter situation. And it was one of the most intense things I've ever been through as a professional. Long story short, I got the phone call from the supervisor saying that an employee had said something that terrified people so much that he doesn't know what to do. I literally grabbed my handbag, slapped my computer down, shoved everything aside, went into the CEO's office, and I said, I'm on my way to the other office. I'll be up there in 2 hours. We just had somebody, blah, blah, blah. I'll tell you more in the car. He's like, okay. So I'm on the car, on the phone with him, racing up. I get in front of the security people. I start working with the special agent because this in particular was on a government property, which made it even all more better, right? So I was working with facility security agents, and long story short, we eventually terminated the guy. But by the time I got up there, I had everything in line as to what we were going to do. I have a very innate being, like I have an instinct inside of me that I just know what to do. I don't know how I got it. It's a God-given gift. It's my thing. So by the time I got up there, the command side of me kicked in, and command is not necessarily bad. It's just having the confidence to be able to make decisions and direct people where they need to go and get them enrolled in tasks. So we get up there. I launched a week-long investigation, stopped everything, what we suspected from happening. The clincher was that, we found some pretty tangible evidence that if we had ignored it, we would have been totally irresponsible. So, so it was to this day, I still watch this person because I wonder, like, is this going to flare up again? I don't think it will. I think he was a lot of bravado. I think had he wanted to do it, he would have done it. But he got caught. And that is something that when you're caught, you usually don't ever try and do something like that again, unless you're completely off the rails, right? So, and he wasn't. He was that guy that, I think at that point, my bite was more than his bark. And I was never rude. I was never mean to him or anything like that. Never went the we're not going there thing, never did the serious thing. I became a totally different version of myself because I knew what I had in front of me was something that either I had to manhandle him at certain points or I had to be extremely compassionate and treat him like a human being. Both of those things worked because I had to bounce between the two. He was that difficult of a personality. So, where did all that come from? It comes from my past of having to run through so many reps of, good customer service. I had to run through so many reps to get my butt chewed out by, an employee that simply doesn't know how to read their paycheck stub and their pay is correct and they don't think it is, right? That's the forging of it. And so by the time I got to something big like this, massive, this is the biggest one I've ever dealt with. And I literally had the confidence to be able to handle this. As a matter of fact, the security director looked at me after, we suspended the guy, we removed all of his access to the thing. And I was, people were watching me and paying attention because I could see all eyes were on me. And the security director, as soon as that guy walked out the door, he turned and looked at me. He says, "You've done this before." I'm like, well, not in this situation, but that was the first. He's like, "Man, do you know what you're doing?" And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, man, I'm like shooting at the wind here, but okay, we're going to roll with that compliment. It's just, your reps. When you deal with difficult people, you're going to get reps in.
I think the tactic that you experienced a few moments ago, all I hear is, I took a deep breath. Because you could have been so emotional through that situation and not, as you stated, not being compassionate to that individual. Not just him, but everybody else that's around. It could have gone a whole nother way.
Yep. And we had the bodies in the building to take him down.
And seeing then, even with something like that, how amped were they? Because they had to get to another level to do that. Yeah. And so I think everyone that's listening, listen to how powerful what Brenda said, which was take a breath. It sounds so simple, but look how it changed the whole atmosphere, for this one individual and everybody else around. And Brenda, I got to say, first, congratulations and thank you for not being on the news.
Oh, well, you're welcome. The thing about that whole situation is that I knew walking in, my feelings were going to have to wait. And one of the things that I do, I work a lot with Navy SEALs.
Mhm.
And I help them transition through the Honor Foundation from active duty into the next, whatever their next venture is in life, either entrepreneurism, they get a job, or they go back to contracting and being, Navy SEALs again, kind of. But, I was lucky to have a command master chief that I could talk through the situation, because everybody else thought I was crazy. And I'm like, no, this is what's happening out in the real world, folks. But, the thing is that, I don't know how to say it. And it's almost going away. But the thing is that I had to compartmentalize how I felt about the whole thing. There wasn't a moment that any of that was about me. And usually when we're confronted with fear, or we're afraid that something in crisis is only going to work, we're focusing on our emotions. And I will tell you, after a week of dealing with it, I took a couple of days off because I had to physically decompress. I was carrying that much stress on my system that I told the boss, I said, yeah, I'm going to be working from home for a couple of days if that's all right. Because I now need to take care of Brenda. Like, he's taken care of, he's fine. He's no longer on our radar. I need to now take care of me, because like, I haven't slept. I haven't eaten very well. I haven't processed how I felt out about it. I even had, the only time I've ever lied in my career as an HR professional was during this. And that was because the managers, we had a meeting and we talked about it. We informed them that this person was no longer around. Everybody knew something was up. The rumor mill, like come on, people talk, right?
Right.
So they knew that they were, and everybody was scared about this guy too. They were really nervous about him. And so this one manager, she goes, do you think he's a threat? And I had the COO sitting next to me, and he looked at me and I said, no, I don't. And the reason why I said that, I didn't know, but at the same time, the environment that we worked in is an environment that if you're not focused on what you're doing, people die.
Right.
So I had to make sure everybody was focused on what they were doing. So when you're dealing with threat and ambiguity and stuff like that, what happens is that our vision starts to go like this, right? And the only thing that we can start focusing in on is what we see here. Which means that as leaders, we have to constantly remind ourselves that get out of that and open that aperture again, because you have to lead beyond the present. And in the situation like what I was faced with is like that moment, I knew is like, I can't be the one to get everybody focused in on the fear of what happens if this guy shows up. There's 2 security stations. He's not getting in. Not going to happen, right? We're in a marsh. Trust me. There's all sorts of creepy ick stuff, and like, the guy is not going to do that, right? He's not that guy. So I had to make sure that they had every confidence in my answer, and I had to believe it, even though I there's no way I could guarantee that. But turned out everything worked out great.
I just have to say, you're a superhero. You really are. I mean, because you have you really have demonstrated what it means to be poised, to be cool, calm, and collected under fire. And it takes a lot of time and energy and effort and experiences to be in that place. Because sometimes we don't know how to keep our emotions in check in a situation like that. Especially as a leader, and to be a great leader, that's how you have to be, and that's how you need to control the environment. Even though you could be all in shambles on inside, but there has to be a way that you can tone it down a little bit and then cry when you get in the car.
Yeah, like I grew up, now I loved my father. Don't think for a minute I didn't. But my dad could not handle the small details. And maybe this is where it started for me. I don't know. But he couldn't handle the small details. The man ran a massive hospital, campus, right? He took it from a broken down thing. And in 20 years, he created it to like one of the third largest in the state of Pennsylvania. So when it came down to the little things, oh my God, I could get my head lopped off across the room. He was so good at the big stuff. He sucked at the little stuff. Right. And I'm talking about, I remember one time he chewed me out. I took a wrong turn. Like, I know Chicago like the back of my hand. And I was on my way to go visit him, and like I took a wrong turn, and I'm on the phone with him, and he just starts yelling at me. And it got to the point where my command kicked in, and I'm like, yo, we're not going there. Right. So, you can have people that are really great at the big things, but the little details, they don't do very well at. And, you know, that's where balance comes into place. You got to be just as good at the little stuff as you are the big stuff.
A lot of times we get blinded by the big stuff because our goals are big, and we don't always understand what the little steps are. And there's something that you mentioned earlier, which is customer service. We don't always understand the community that we serve. Whether it's first we think external customers, but we also have internal customers as well. And sometimes we don't take the time to listen to them, to understand them, just as much as those external, because the internal ones are more important because they carry the message, right? They carry the mission, you know, and for everyone else to buy into it. So I think those are things that we miss sometimes as leaders, not the importance of those that are inside the doors, just as much as those that are on the outside.
Yeah. And, you know, and the thing about customer service today is that it's very different today than it was when you and I were younger.
Right.
It really is. And I wish people today could see what it used to be like. And, you know, in today's environment, it's all about me. And I'm not saying that to be mean or nasty. It is what it is. But instead of it being about you, what about having it be about a mutual win? You know? And that's what really good customer service is like you got somebody that comes in. Like I remember my grandfather actually taught me this lesson. My grandfather used to run he owned a hardware store in Hawaii. And, you know, there's only so much business that you're going to get on a rock in the middle of the Pacific. And they were the best at it in the nation, to be honest with you, in this particular co-op. And so he had an employee that there's a contractor that broke a spade shovel, right? Cost $5 back in the 80s. And she was arguing with the customer and saying, no, you broke this. I can't take this back. It's very obvious you broke it. It's in the middle. Like wow. The whole wooden stick it's broken. It's split in two. She goes, this is not us. This is you. My grandfather walked by and he heard her say that. And he said, sir, he said, go ahead and return it. It's fine. We're going to do this for you this one time. Please go ahead and pick out another shovel. We'll just go ahead and you can do an exchange, or we can give you your money back, or we just put a credit on your account. And he said, just do a credit on my account. That's not a problem. So he walks away and she got really angry. She goes, that guy's screwing you over. He says, yes, he is screwing me over. But you know what? That's a $5 shovel. He's a $150,000 a year customer. I don't want him going across the other side of the island. Because islanders, they only shop in their own neighborhood, right? So he said, I don't want him going across the island to the competitor to transfer his $150K over to them. And she never would have thought about that. And then once she realized his theology behind this, under why he had such a liberal return policy, she understood it, right? And then she was able to, you know, deliver on that. So in this world, like we get these knee-jerk responses, just like she did, right? She's standing on a principle, absolutely, but it wasn't a principle of customer service. It was a principle of protecting the company. When in fact, the actual protection wasn't the $5 shovel. It was the $150,000 relationship.
Sometimes we don't see the whole story. Right. Like we see the moment and not know the value that's sitting here in front of us.
Right.
You know, and I think that's that could have been a whole messy situation too. Like I'm listening to you, it could have gone a billion different ways. And then, like you said, now this customer is now going across the island. But with him going across the island, what other referrals, testimonials, or whatever else would have happened, or missed if that would have changed that atmosphere? So it's more to it than just, hey, this $5 shovel.
Yeah. So we've got a whole entire culture in today's environment in business that's looking at this instead of opening up this, right? They're only looking at it through this lens as how they see the world. And this is very much a culture where you feel like you always have to like protect yourself and you have to go to battle for everything. And that's not the case. If you have the right kind of conversations and you're coming from a place of logic and you're recognizing that what is happening to you and the ego and the emotion that is coming up is just the initial reaction, right? You can therefore course correct and put together a positive response. So when we look at it internally, when we're dealing, especially like with difficult people or people that we perceive as difficult people, that anxiety or that intensity builds up over time. So it's kind of like a vortex, right? You only have so much interaction with them over time, but then as it goes on, it goes down this vortex that gets skinnier and skinnier and skinnier.
Right,
and this motion is really what's happening inside of you. It gets to the point where, it started happening less frequency. Now you're kind of running up against it more because you're thinking about it. And then all of a sudden your brain starts to create this story about it. And then all of a sudden you're like way down into the bottom and you're just like amped up and it's like, right? But that's what happens to us. You got to bust that vortex open and you have to recognize that, listen, maybe this is in my head, and there are things that do happen. People do just say stupid things and they say things that are hurtful and they say things that are antagonistic, right? But you can break that vortex sooner by very simply asking a question. It's like, well, help me understand what's going on. Simple. And what you're doing is you're forcing them to give you an answer outside of that ego. And then you have to remember, you have to listen outside of your own ego, right? So my next door neighbor when I grew up was second and third generation Oldsmobile and Pontiac dealers. Like if anybody even knows what an Oldsmobile and Pontiac is to this day, congratulations. But so they're now General GM dealers, right? So their youngest son, before I even got my first car, because he wanted to make sure I was taken care of. He pulled me aside and he taught me everything I needed to know about a car engine back in the 80s. And what I learned about is that if you understand the engine, you understand how all the systems essentially work because it's all centralized, right? The engine is what makes motion happen with the vehicle. Well, if you look at human beings, our engine is our ego. And if you understand how the ego operates, not that they have one, because we all have one, but the ego is there to protect us. So typically what happens is that when we start seeing ego up, that's because it's a whoopee or like a protective blanket that's covering something such as fear or insecurity or the fear of failure or being recognized as something that they don't want to be recognized as. So that's what you're always going to be running up against. So if you can bust that vortex open and just say, well, can you help me understand, like, how did we get here? Help me understand what's going on. Like, break it down for me so that I'm now looking at the same thing that you're looking at, but like you're painting this picture for me. We don't often do that. And you watch social media and you don't see it, right? You see people like squabbling and people love that stuff. They love to feed off of it. But you know what it does? It just perpetuates it.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
It doesn't help anything.
Not at all. Brenda, we kind of went over our time a little bit.
I'm sorry.
No, but I'm saying that because we're going to have you back on the show.
I love it.
In all reality. But Brenda, I totally agree that social media doesn't help. It really doesn't. Especially when we want to be like those that we see on social media. Especially when we see those that are on these award shows or TV shows or movies or whatever it is. But when you look at these shows, that's nothing but ego as well. That's a lot of turmoil and everything else going on, especially in these reality TV shows. And we what's the thought? Art imitates life, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So we keep doing that. So I agree with you that somehow we need to turn the volume down on this ego. We need to turn the volume down on this nonsense or being messy, because that's the other part that you talk about, right? And so for those individuals that don't know how to turn down the volume, where can they find you so they can figure that part out?
Yeah, so I'm in a couple of different places. I actually have it. So actually, if you want to give your audience a gift of mine, I share this when I teach. I share it when I speak on stage, and I share it on podcasts. I share it basically everywhere I go. But I actually have a free course that I'm not going to sit there and hit you up, but it's called Impact Scripts. And you heard me say one of them earlier, and that is help me understand, right? These are 4 scripts that I've been using for 25 plus years that I have found to be very, very helpful when you're running up against a situation with a person, either a difficult personality or a crisis or something like that, right? where there's a lot of emotion that's involved. It's very easy to find. It's over at heybrenda.com. I make it simple because my last name is not easily remembered. So heybrenda.com. And in that, you can get access to impact scripts. In addition to that, here's something really cool. I have a book that's coming out at the end of the month, and I literally have 2 more following it immediately after. So the book that's coming up is called The Leadership Survival Kit.
Okay.
Yeah, and you'll be able to, you can find all my books over on Amazon.com. Unfortunately, you're going to have to spell my last name out, because if you don't, you're going to run up against a really, really funny book that is not me.
So what I will do for you, I will go on Amazon and make sure that link is directly to your author page.
Yeah, if you put it to my profile link, then you'll see all the books that I put out there. But the next book that's going to come out is going to be called The Coworker Survival Kit.
Okay.
So 2 totally different approaches, but it's giving people the actionable tools that they can implement when they're running up against certain situations.
Okay. Nice. So for those of you, because I didn't say her last name earlier because I didn't want to butcher it. But I believe it's Neckvatal.
Neckvatal. Very close. Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. I've heard it 1,000 different ways. And I'm the only one in the country, so I'm pretty easy to find.
Because I practiced it. I looked in the mirror. I told my wife. I was doing everything.
How the hell do you do this?
because I wanted to be prepared. I listened to interviews. I looked at your YouTube channel. I was everywhere. And for whatever reason,
I remember the first time I saw it. I asked my ex, I'm like, how do you say this?
That's funny. But I appreciate you coming on the show. I appreciate you showing taking that deep breath, how we can change the world, because that could have been a whole nother situation. And that would have changed the world for a lot of different people. But I do have one more question before I let you go, though.
Sure.
So it's my would you rather question I warned you about before.
Oh, yeah.
So would you rather choose 3 doors or a fork in the road? Now, use your imagination. No box, no whatever. So think outside the box, use your imagination. Would you choose 3 doors or a fork in the road?
I think I would choose a fork in the road.
Any particular reason
why?
Because
I think forks in the road actually are what build character.
Okay. Just simple, straight. Nothing more, nothing less.
So I mean, to 3 doors, you only have 1 in 3 chances, right, of doing something. But you're anticipating that there's something going to be good, and you can either be excited about it or you can, be let down. Fork in the road, that's a journey. And so you're always going to get stuff that's going to be thrown at you that's going to require you to be a better version of yourself. And if that is your path, you're going to work through it. If you take a fork in the road and you don't like the direction that you go in, there's nothing out there that says you can't backtrack and go back and take the other turn.
You're right. That's the imagination part, thinking outside the box. But I think it really truly shows who you are as an individual. Because you're like, hey, I'm either going to go right or left, and I'm going to deal with it one way or another. Bring it.
Exactly. Yeah, there's no GPS on this one.
I know, right? But Brenda, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
No problem. And I thank y'all very much for listening to the That Will Nevr Work podcast. I'm sorry. I'm confusing the other podcast, the No Fruit podcast.
It's okay. It's that kind of day.
But I thank y'all very much for listening, and I'll talk to y'all just a little bit later.
Thanks for listening. Follow Maurice Chism on social media to stay connected, and check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, that will never work. Or will it?